Hello, welcome to another Seeds of Flourishing video. So in today's video I wanted to revisit a survey that I think I've spoken about before in earlier videos, certainly in some of my programming videos and probably in at least one early flourishing based episode. And the survey in question is the 2022 Developer Survey from Stack Overflow. So if you don't know much about Stack Overflow, I'm not going to go into any great details in this episode. I'm more interested in the survey, but I will include a link to an article about the website so you can understand exactly what role they fulfill within programming generally. But my main focus is going to be on the technology section of the 2022 Developer Survey. Now this survey is done every year. They start collecting stuff, questionnaires around May 2022. Sometime around that, or early 2022 I suppose, and it gets released around July. And again, I'll include a link so you can sort of read the methodology behind this. Now the reason why I like this survey so much is, as I've explained in previous episodes, although in part of my career in IT I did program full-time, but I also have just a hobby interest in programming, particularly now. And as a consequence, it's nice, I find, to every year check out the Developer Survey and then going forward for the rest of that year, use it as stimulus or an inspiration for exploring certain aspects of programming. And that's what today's video is mainly about. The reason why I've chosen to do it this particular episode is that recently I dipped my toe back into some Python programming. So I run Anaconda. I find this is a great environment that gives you access to all the Python goodies and a lot of other things as well, and allows you to easily launch and install certain components that I find very useful. Particularly, Anaconda is mainly aimed at data science, and so it's got RStudio in it as well. The components in here I mainly use are Jupyter Notebook and Spider. Sometimes I go into the command prompt if I want to sort of invoke some command, but generally these are the two ones I spend most time in if I'm dabbling in Python. I normally start off in the notebook, and then when I reach a certain point I then save it as a regular Python file, and then I go into Spider and carry on with that. So I'd been messing around in the last week, initially in the notebook and then in Spider, with a program that talks to the Spotify API. And so at the moment I'm in the middle of tweaking this. It's pretty rough and ready, because I'm really just doing this for my own amusement, not to release it in any capacity. And so I've been working around with the various aspects or various GET requests that you can issue to the Spotify API to pull back related artists for a given Spotify artist. And then once that's done, I then get it to pull down recommended albums from Best Ever Albums, where I've already pre-saved their CSV files. So that's what I'm dabbling around at the moment. But that's not so much about what I want to talk about in this episode. It's more to go through the Stack Overflow survey, particularly this technological aspect. So let's just look at the most popular technologies, because this is always an interesting starting point for me. What I tend to do with this a little bit is I sort of do a bit of quick and dirty Pareto. So there's about 42 entries on here. So normally I just look at the top 20% of that. So this is around, the top 8 or 10 if you want to extend it a little bit. So you've got JavaScript, HTML/CSS, SQL, Python, TypeScript, Java, Bash, Shell, or I'm assuming they also mean command line, those sort of things. C#, C++, PHP, and C. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 brings us roughly down to here. So when I'm looking at this, I would just like to see, on this list, what have I dabbled with, or what haven't I? And all of these, in some capacity, I've used. Some I consider to have used professionally, like JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL. Other ones I've just coded in as, for my own personal amusement, as a hobby, like Python and Java. And then other ones, I suppose it's more of writing small little utilities in a workplace, but more for my own use. So in C++, for instance, and C. Also, I did do a little bit of PHP professionally, although I did end up not using the work that I'd done. So the main ones that I haven't really coded in any great capacity is TypeScript, which I believe is a superset of JavaScript, and C#. So those would definitely be on my bucket list. Also, what's interesting is you can look at this from the lens of, so this is all respondents, professional developers, and then learning to code. So the learning to code one, the order sort of changes around a bit. And then we've got the most loved, dreaded and wanted. Now at the moment I'm just looking at coding, programming, scripting and markup languages. If you scroll down in all of these areas, it'll go into things like databases, cloud platforms and web frameworks and technologies, things like that. But in today's video I'm just going to be concerned, I suppose, with the programming, scripting and markup languages. So then we look at the most loved, dreaded and wanted. So Rust, Elixir, Clojure, TypeScript, Julia, Python, Delphi, Go, SQL, C#, Kotlin, Swift. And when I get to this one, there's a lot less things at the top here than I'm familiar with, or I'm aware of, but I just haven't coded in any great detail. I'm not sure how long the list is here, looking what it would be around about 50. So, maybe like, again, if I focused on the first 10. So within this, I've done a bit of Rust, but again, most of the things here is purely for, as a hobby. So Rust, Clojure, Python comes up again. I have coded in SQL, or not, I have done SQL. But most of these, they would be on, a imaginary bucket list, I think, if I was putting one together. Certainly I remember Delphi, but I've never programmed in that. This is an interesting diagram. So this shows the relationships between developers that want to start in a language and then want to work in another language. So you can sort of see here, if you hover over, it'll show you, supposing you're working with JavaScript, in terms of the people that answered the questionnaires, what do they want to work with going forward? So I think that's a pretty cool interface. I don't think I've ever seen that before in terms of representing data. And again, you've got professional developers and learning to code. Now this one, I've always tend to go down a bit of a rabbit hole with this. And I've been through now in all the years and sort of worked out what each year, like year on year, what programming languages always appear high up the list. And so it was interesting to see this year, after Clojure seemingly dropped off the list, come back up to the top again. There's a whole load of other ones here that seem to constantly year on year make the list. In fact, I think most of these here. But again, if I start off with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I've been playing around with Rust. I've already done a bit of Perl back in the day. Around the same time I was playing around with PHP. I did dabble with Clojure last year, or a couple of years ago now probably, and a little bit of F#, but again that was more just purely for fun. I keep meaning to fully engage with Lisp, although Clojure is a dialect of Lisp. So yeah, lots of interesting ones on here that I think I'm going to interact with in some way over the next few years, on and off. And it'll be interesting, and I did start it a little bit to maybe try that program out and convert it into another language, but at the same point, bearing in mind the particular idioms of that language and playing to those as well. Because that's an easy trap to fall in, like when you switch between languages, is you're coding, say, in Rust, but it has a certain Python-esque look to it when you look at your code. The trick is trying to take the concept and the idea and rework it in Rust without pulling across a sort of Python-like structure to the way you lay your code out. Maybe what I need to do if I was doing that is, structure around how Rust is best structured. And I did actually take that previous program, or an element of it, where I had the program looking up on Last.fm related artists for a particular artist, and tried out in Clojure, a very simple version of that, where it didn't look up anything else apart from related artists. And it was fun to do that. And certainly with, I think, like Clojure and F#, because they're functional languages, the code looks quite different when you're coding there from, say, in Python. So yeah, I think that's all I really want to talk about. Apart from the obvious, was if you go into version control, Git is top of the list there. So there we have it. Hopefully another source of inspiration for any potential coders out there that might be interested in sort of, finding a bit of a push into maybe what languages to look at. I think this is certainly a very good starting point. And if you're just big into stats, which I am, I just love looking through reports like this and, looking at and doing various, Pareto analysis, or just looking at the results year on year and then seeing where everything falls. I find that fascinating. I've always had a love for statistics back when I took it as an extra course when I stayed on a year after I took my O-levels in the UK. So thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I'll catch you in the next video.